Good, so my name is Fred Vallaeys. Thank you for having me. It's very exciting and very scary, actually, to be at an RKG event because I've been at Google for about 10 years, and I was on the product team, and we'd get these questions once in a while from customers who were in betas, who were testing the latest and the greatest features. And some of these customers, within 10 minutes, they'd call up and they'd be like, is this a feature or is this a bug? And RKG was always one of those. And you knew that the moment that George Mitchie would come to us and have a question, I knew I'd have to mobilize half the product team to get the answer. So being here is a little bit scary because I know George is here. Where are you, George? Right here. There. So go easy on the questions, please. But it's really a pleasure to be here, and for all of you guys who are customers of RKG to help you guys see what Google's doing and maybe show you some of the new stuff that RKG can help you with. So the topic, I switched it up a little bit, so it's no longer really just the 5 things for performance marketers. We're going to talk about a lot of that still, but I kind of wanted to take it a level up and talk about innovation at Google, because I think it's always fun to talk about the innovations that Google's coming up with and sort of understanding how Google goes about it, the Google philosophy of running a business. And hopefully it can be helpful to some of you guys as well as you're building and growing your businesses and trying to instill some of those same values that Google has. So it's always helpful to take a step back too and say, what is Google's mission, right? Because we've had a busy week already. Just in the past few days, we've announced that Chrome is now the #1 web browser in the United States. The Motorola deal has closed. God knows what else Google's been up to in these last few days. And sometimes people come up to me and they ask, well, why is Google doing all of these things? Well, how does it all fit into the bigger picture? Is Google just trying to be everything to everyone? And sometimes it seems like that, but here's the mission that we have. It's to organize all the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And if you think about it, everything that we're doing really does fit into that strategy. Now, for you guys as advertisers, it's good to see that Google wants to organize the world's information, because ads, after all, are information too. A lot of search engines, they came around and they said, well, to us it's about organizing websites and organizing what exists on the internet. Google said, we want to organize the world's information. And yes, websites are a good first place to start. That's something that's useful right now, but we should go way beyond that. And in a little bit, I'll talk a bit about what we're doing in the local space, for example. So organizing the information about the world around us, that is a big part of what Google does as well. The slide, as you notice, you see this cell phone here? How old is that thing, right? But what's kind of cool is that this slide and this mission statement, that's the original mission statement. When Google was started and an advanced cell phone looked like that, Google said it needs to be about universal accessibility. 14 years ago, everybody was on their desktops doing searches, if they were doing searches at all, if they've even heard about Google, right? But Sergey and Larry, the 2 founders, they said, we need to organize the world's information today, and we need to make sure that no matter how you want to access it, whether you're at a desk with a computer in front of you or you have some sort of a mobile device, that information becomes accessible to you. And that was a pretty good vision, right? I mean, so this week with the Motorola deal closing, that is just one extension of that mission of making it accessible to everyone. And by the way, the other thing that may be not as relevant to us in the room here, but that accessibility goes far beyond the developed world. So for example, if you have a poor farming village in India and the crops are failing because there's a drought, those people could really, really benefit from having information about how other villages have dealt with that same issue. Right? If you take all the world's information and you make it accessible to anyone and everyone, they can start learning, they can start improving their own lives from that type of information. And now all of a sudden, so some projects that Google is helping with is putting solar-powered call boxes in villages. Right? That village maybe doesn't have an internet connection, maybe don't have an internet cafe, but now any farmer can come up to a box, push a button, actually ask their question. An operator can then answer that and can give them the information so that person can make their life better. Right? That's what it's all about for Google. Now, as far as innovation, Google does have about 9 rules that we've had since the start and that have evolved to some degree, but about 9 rules of how we remain innovative as a company. And today I thought I would talk the frame around 3 of these points. The first one that you've probably heard about is the 20% rule. 20% is at the core of all that we do. What comes out of that is universal accessibility and Google Glass. I'll talk to you a little bit about that. And then continuous innovation, not instant perfection. That's a great one for advertisers. The ads products at Google have been around for 12 years. So when I joined Google in 2002, AdWords had just gone self-service. I was brought in to help translate it into Dutch for the Benelux markets. But over the years, obviously, there's been a lot of enhancements. There's been a lot of complaints. And I'll specifically talk about the display network. The display network, when that was launched, that was a nightmare. We did everything wrong, right? But nowadays, it's pretty damn good because we've spent a lot of time iterating, innovating, and making it better based on what users and advertisers have told us. And then finally, I'll leave you with one great example of delighting users. So hopefully all of you fall in that category where at least a couple times a year we delight you with the products that we put out there. And we'll show you one specific example of where we're taking that even one step further. All right, so 20% is at the core of everything that we do. Now, you guys have heard about the 20% rule at Google, right? So this is where any engineer, any product manager, not really everyone at Google. If you're on the sales team, it's often a little bit harder to get that 20% time. But that's sort of the notion. You get 20% of your time to dedicate to anything you are passionate about, that you think would be really interesting to do. Now, in reality, what it means is that you get to work Saturday on anything you want. But we still call it the 20% rule. And what is some of the fun stuff, the cool stuff that has come out of the 20% time that is allocated to this? Gmail is one example. This was a guy by the name of Paul Buchheit. He was an engineer. And he said, you know, it's 2004. I'm using email on the internet. I get an inbox, 5 gigabytes. So every time somebody sends me a few photos, I have to delete my whole inbox to be able to receive another email. Otherwise, it bounces. That's stupid. Right? Another core philosophy that Google has is don't think about limitations. Kind of sidetracking here, but thinking about when we acquired YouTube. If you would have said, oh, YouTube is being acquired, and every single minute, 45 hours of video is going to be posted on YouTube, if you'd asked me, I would have said, oh my God, how do we hire enough people to stick in the hard drives fast enough to keep up with that demand? But luckily, there's smarter people running Google than me, and they said, you know, Moore's law will hold. Storage will become cheaper. Bandwidth will become cheaper. In a few years from now, these crazy numbers are not going to be all that crazy anymore. And guess what? If a person clicks one ad, we might actually make a profit on something like Gmail. They click one ad during the year because it's so cheap, because we have the economies of scale, because technology is getting so much better. So that was Gmail. The other problem with Gmail, and the reason that Gmail was invented, was that doing a search through an inbox on Microsoft, for example, you remember how long that took? Maybe for some of you guys it still takes a long time because you're still using that, but it takes a long time. And the engineer just said, that's unacceptable. Why is it faster to do a search over the whole internet, billions of pages? Why is that faster than searching through my history of maybe 5 years of email? That should not be the case. So what we did is in 2004, we built Gmail, and we were going to launch it on April 1st. Google's notorious for doing April Fool's jokes. And so we were going to say there's a gigabyte of email for free on the internet. And keep in mind, that was 200 times the size of the average mailbox you would get from Yahoo or Microsoft at the time. So we really believed people would think it was a joke. And then, unfortunately, it was leaked the day before, so we kind of hit that we missed the April Fool's joke, but people were still pretty impressed. The other example on there is Google News. That was another 20% project. And this one was sort of unfortunate circumstances, but 2 of our engineers were at a conference when 9/11 happened. And they got stuck at that location because the planes weren't flying anymore. And kind of embarrassingly for these 2 engineers who were actually in charge of search quality, if you did a search for World Trade Center at that time, the top result was the restaurant at the top of the World Trade Center. And that was completely unacceptable, right? And it was so bad that Google, for the first time, really had to put a message on its homepage that said something's happened. We're not very good at news, but please go check out abc.com, fox.com, cnn.com, all of these other sites. And that was an embarrassment to Google, especially these 2 guys who ran the search systems. And so they said, well, why don't we have something that is better at detecting news? Right? So a page like cnn.com, we should probably be crawling that every couple of seconds. Because if something happens, that needs to be top of Google. And so Google News came out of that. Today, that's still not a monetized product. That's just something that users hopefully like. That's something that brings users to Google, keeps them on Google, and then when they need to do a search, they'll hopefully use Google for that as well. Now, that's sort of the history of 20% projects. One of our founders, Sergey Brin, he loves space. He loves crazy ideas. And he said, I want to go and maybe do 20% type projects full time. And the way that Google thinks about 20% projects and sort of the allocation of resources within the company is a 70-20-10 rule. So 70% of everything that we do has to be related to the core business. Core business being search, ads, apps, mobile, those types of things. 20% is related. So that's the stuff like Google News, for example. 10% is anything and everything that you can imagine. Right? That's putting fiber in Kansas City. That is putting Wi-Fi in Mountain View. That's some of the other crazy stuff that we're doing. That's taking museums and putting museums online on Google Maps. And so Sergey said, I want to do more of these crazy things. And one of his craziest ideas, which to date he has not done, but he wants to build a space elevator. Have you guys heard about space elevators and space tethers? So this is essentially a satellite that you launch into suborbit. You connect it to Earth by a string. And it's the circular motion of the Earth that keeps that satellite spinning. And because it's attached by a string, you can actually run an elevator up and down the string to that platform. And so the reason Sergey thinks this is interesting is that he believes that the delivery mechanism of packages in the world could be much improved if we could take them into space and shoot them into people's backyards. It's pretty damn crazy, right? So at some point, I'm sure he'll get there. But let me show you something else he's been up to. So he started a division within Google. It's called Google X. And Google X is a fantastic group. It's a small group within Google, but they have at their mission, as a mission to build products that are commercially viable in roughly 10 to 100 years from now. I would love to work at a company that has, where I might not even see the commercial viability. They get to do some pretty cool stuff, and I'll show you one of them here. So that's Google Glass. That is actually a product that exists today. Sergey's been spotted wearing this, and that's a video that demonstrates sort of what will be possible with that. Pretty crazy stuff, pretty cool stuff, maybe a little scary. Already people are so distracted on their cell phones, but this could really take that to the next level, I guess. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is continuous innovation and not instant perfection. And this is the section where I'll talk a little bit about the ads products that we have. Now, within ads and the internet in general, there's really been a couple of driving forces that have transformed the internet very dramatically. Social, local, and mobile are the three that come to mind. And John Doerr, a famous venture capitalist in the Silicon Valley, he said, social, local, and mobile, individually pretty interesting, but you put them together and you get the collision of those three and incredible things start happening. And if you look at a lot of products today that are very popular, a lot of the stuff that Google's doing, there's an element of social, local, and mobile embedded in that. This video was just a good example of that, right? It was somebody walking about, having that local experience. They were mobile because they were connected to everyone else, and they had a social experience because they could share it with other people. Those are transformational experiences. Now, let me look at each of these individually. So I'm going to start with social. And keep in mind, here we're talking about continuous innovation, not instant perfection. And I think social at Google is probably the classic example of how we get it wrong, and wrong again, and then finally get it right. So with social, Google started with the first social network was Google Orkut. Orkut still exists today. Orkut was a 20% project that was done by a guy named Orkut. That's where the name of the social network comes from. And what he did is he went home for his Christmas break, and he said, I would like to build a social network. He did. He brought it back. He showed it to Larry and Sergey and the rest of the executive management group, and they said, that's pretty cool. Go ahead and launch it. That can be your 20% project from now on. And Google's first social network was born. Now, it had one major problem. He built it on Microsoft technology. That's a problem at Google. It's something we don't know how to use very well. And as a result, the system was kind of slow. And because it was kind of slow, people in the United States tried it, didn't really like it, didn't work for them. It was sort of like the old social networks, and they moved on. Whereas in Brazil and India, where people don't have the same high expectation of a fast internet connection, it became the most popular social network. To this day, it's still very big in those two markets. Now, from an advertiser's perspective, it is a bit problematic because they're not necessarily the highest monetizing markets. So Orkut is not our most successful product. So Google said, what do we do to sort of get into the United States market? In the previous session, by the way, they explained how Google was able to look at Facebook data, actually never been able to look at Facebook data, but looking at Twitter data to find social connections between people and to give you better search results. And then when Twitter pulled the fire hose from Google, now Google has no insight whatsoever into what's happening on Facebook, into what's happening on Twitter. So Google did need to have an understanding of how people are socially connected. And that's where Google Buzz came in. So Google Buzz was launched, and that was a fiasco too, because it automatically decided who your social connections were based on who you frequently emailed and who you frequently chatted with. Some people who were having affairs and frequently emailed those people they were having affairs with, all of a sudden their spouses could see, why are you talking to that person so much? Why is she in your network? Right? So that was a bit of a privacy debacle, and that product didn't do very well in the long term either. And then finally Google said, well, okay, how about this? Let's try Google+. Let's try something completely different. And this was under the leadership of Vic Gondotra, who came to Larry and Sergey and said, you know, I really think we can do this social thing right, and it's very, very important that we do, so why don't we try a new thing? And this new thing was Google+. Now, to talk about Google+, it's important to understand that Google didn't necessarily want to build a whole new social network. What Google said was, people use our products, and for the most part, they love our products. They love the search results. They love photos on Google. But couldn't we make those products and those experiences even better if we had some sort of understanding of who you are as a person and who you are socially connected to? And that was the start for it. And so the team then started asking questions about, well, how do we make a social experience that's more similar to how people behave socially in the real world as opposed to how they behave on social networks that exist today? And one thing that was very important in that was the notion of circles. Now, how many of you guys have more than 500 friends on Facebook? Bet most of you, right? And of those people, keep your hands up. As you accrued more and more friends, did you find yourself sharing less and less? I found myself sharing less and less. And the reason for that was that my manager was in there, my coworkers, my friends, my family, people I met at conferences. It was just this whole huge network of various people from all my different parts of life. And if I went on vacation and took some photos, I wasn't comfortable sharing that because my coworkers might see them, right? And similarly, if I found an interesting article that I thought my coworkers should read, I didn't maybe want to share it because my grandma would get confused. And so what Google said is, let's have a product that at its core has the notion of a circle. So every time you add a connection, you put that connection into a certain bucket. You can have as many buckets as you want, and we call them circles. And so now what you can do is any piece of content that you share it either publicly, that is one option, or you share it to specific circles. So it lets you connect with people the way that you normally would. You know, if I'm going home, if I'm having dinner with my family, I tell different stories than I tell here at this type of an event. Circles enables you to do the same thing on a social platform. Now, social obviously matters because if you travel to a place like Charlottesville, you want to know about restaurants, you want to know about hotels. Well, yes, you do a Google search, and maybe you use Kayak, and maybe you go on Yelp. But at the end of the day, if you know someone who's been here, you know, I know George. I might ask George, where should I stay? You live here. You know what's good, right? It's that social connection that matters most, and these are some stats behind it. Now, in terms of social recommendations, it has been complicated on the internet, right? If you wanted to put a social recommendation behind a product, a service, a hotel, something like that, your options in the past was to click the Facebook like button. That was pretty much it. Now, the problem with the Facebook like button for me was, again, I'd be spamming all of my friends. If I like the Omni Hotel here, why do I want to Facebook like that? Because it would then tell all my friends, it would show up in the stream, it would tell everyone, oh, Fred's traveling again, he's staying at this hotel, when people effectively don't care. So what Google did is, we said, why can't we do something like +1s? And so a +1 is that same sort of social recommendation, except it's hidden, it stays inside of Google until the moment that it becomes relevant to the user. And that's important because now what happens is, if one of my friends goes and does a Google search, and I've stayed at this hotel, and I've clicked the +1 on this hotel, there you go. So now my friends that I'm socially connected to, they see, oh, this was a Google result that Google would have given you anyway. But by the way, did you realize that 5 of your friends liked it? And these are the 5 friends of yours? Right? I have this one friend. If I see that he recommends a restaurant, I know I'm not going to eat there because I hate his taste in restaurants. See, that's a decision that I can now make because I start understanding the social connections of recommendations and the things that people have used. So with these +1s, you can put them on your own websites. And if you're not doing this yet, this is a no-brainer, right? Next to every article where you have a tweeted button, a Facebook like it button, put the +1 button on there as well. Because that's going to give you +1s, and those +1s, they will come back and they will eventually help you across the whole internet. So what's cool about the +1 is that the +1 lives at the level of a web page. And it doesn't matter if somebody clicked the +1 on an ad, an organic result, or directly on your website. It all feeds into a central repository. And no matter where the user then has another experience that involves that same page, the +1s and the social recommendations come back out. And what this does for advertisers is it boosts the click-through rate. And guess what? If you have a higher click-through rate on ads, your quality score goes up. And if your quality score goes up, your price goes down. Right? So there's not a direct connection. It's not Google saying, oh, if somebody has more +1s, we're going to give you a higher quality score. But there's the indirect effect that people tend to notice those ads more. They tend to click on them more often, and that boosts you up. Right? So putting that button on there can have immediate monetary impact on your business by improving your quality score. When it comes to search engine optimization, there Google says it is, in fact, something that they look at. If there's more +1s, then that's probably a pretty good site, probably something that deserves to be higher up in the rankings. Now, on the flip side, there's also the negative one. Not a lot of people know about this, but more recently, over the past 6 months or so, if you click on a Google result and you use the back button relatively quickly, Google asks you, next to that search result, next to where it says the cache results, would you like to hide this website from future search results? Right? So if you find a site and it's consistently bad, you can say, hide this from my search results. It's effectively a -1. If there's enough -1s, people blocking that result, Google will take a look at that, and Google will say, is there something wrong with this site? Is that something that maybe we should take a look at algorithmically, removing from the search results, based on how many people we see don't like this? Another little sidetrack here, but the way that Google tries to do everything quality-related, everything ranking-related, is they start with humans. Right? So real humans look at search results and say, this is a good result or this is a bad result. In fact, we have human raters that have a rating scale. That data comes in, and now the engineers, they start looking for patterns. If they see there's a pattern of bad websites, they start to figure out how can we build a system that automatically finds sites like this and others like it, and then automatically give those some sort of a penalty. Right? Let's call it panda, let's call it penguin. What's the next black and white animal that we can find? Right? So that'll keep happening. Now, and up to this point, by the way, I've talked about Google Plus and sort of social, but none of this for none of this you've had to go to a social network page. Right? This is using exactly the Google products that you use today, search, photos, Gmail, all of those things. You do not have to go to a social network, but you still get benefit from the social connections that Google now understands you to have. Now, if you do want to have that social networking experience, by the way, is Facebook down another 10% today? I own stocks, so I hope not. It's up 5, thank God. But here's the Google version of a social networking experience. And a couple of things that I will point out on this page that I think are pretty cool. Again, it's the fact that you have circles. So through these circles, you can have sharing to different groups of people. You can have a Google Plus page for yourself personally, or you can also have one for a business or an entity. Now, imagine as a business, you could have a circle of long-time customers, your most profitable customers, the customers who complain a lot. And guess what? Now you can share different types of information with each of these circles. Maybe your best customers, you send them a special coupon once in a while. You also have Hangouts. Hangouts are 10-way video chats. So you could do a virtual focus group. You can invite the circle of customers who don't like you very much, You could sit them all down, 10-way video chat, and you could get them to tell you right there why they don't like you. A virtual focus group, and it's completely free of charge. You could even do a Google Hangout on air. Now, this is brand new. This has only been launched about 2 weeks ago publicly. And this is the ability for you to say, okay, I have 10 people who are talking to each other, but I'm going to broadcast the whole thing, and I'm going to record it on YouTube, and anyone can tune in. So it's almost like having your own TV channel now, right? You know, for a company like RKG, you might have a discussion about quality score with your customers and broadcast that to anyone in this room or anyone in the world. I mean, think about what this could do for your businesses. We've had yoga instructors coming up and saying, could I teach yoga out of my house? So instead of people watching a DVD, it's actually me teaching it. So it's more interactive experience, but it's all done through Google. Yes, you could. And no, it does not cost you anything. It's completely free. Right? So completely new business models can come out of this. And then another little known feature is the ripple. So how often have you wondered, okay, well, fine, I share something on Twitter, I share something on Facebook, I share something on Google+. How does that message propagate throughout the internet? Does it actually get picked up? And are there certain people who pick it up and who then share it that seem to be more important than others? Well, this is the ripples. So this tells you, here, for example, Red Bull posted a message, and next to every post, there's a little options button on Google+. You can click that, and you can say, show me the ripples. When you see those ripples, you can see in this case, Red Bull, it was reshared by a bunch of people. Right? It went out to all those people. But Ben Zimmer and Ido Green, when they picked it up, they reshared it. It seemed to go to a whole bunch of other people. They were pretty influential. So if Red Bull doesn't know who those two people are, you should get to know them. You should figure out who are these people? Why are they influencers for my brand? How can I connect to them? Do I put them in a different circle? Maybe I share stuff with them earlier than with everyone else because they seem to be my brand advocates somehow. Right? So that's information that you can get out of there. Anyway, that's the social experience. Let's talk about local for a bit. Local is important because 1 in 5 searches on Google are local in nature. You look on a mobile device, it's even higher. It's 1 in 3 searches on Google are local in nature. Now, for you guys, if you run e-commerce or you have national campaigns, going local can be quite challenging. It can be quite involved, but I'll show you a couple of new things that we have to maybe make that easier. Now, as far as the local experience for users, like I said, for Google, it's about taking all the world's information and making it accessible. And so in the past, that meant, okay, we'll find you the right website that sells the product that you want. And then if that happens to be a store, we'll give you driving directions to the mall. But now we'll even take you inside of the mall, inside of the airport, so that when you're walking to the store, we'll show you exactly where it is. And then even more better, we'll take you inside the business with photos. These are Google Business photos. So if you're looking for a restaurant, and you have a website, or you have this great photo that shows you, oh my God, it's right there on the water, this is a beautiful location. This is pretty compelling, right? This is the stuff that's going to bring people in the door. This is available to every business. Every business can have these types of experiences, either hire a photographer that Google recommends, or do it yourself. Now, for advertisers, the latest innovations here, there's 2 of them. One of them is zip code targeting. Zip code targeting, that's really good, right? Because if you have a traditional media campaign, typically you have targeted based on zip codes. You have flyers going to certain zip codes, you have maybe TV ads going to certain zip codes. Now you can back that up with zip code targeting on AdWords. Keep in mind, AdWords in the past was not zip code level, it was city level. And city level even then was sort of sketchy in some cases because it was defined based on the city center as known by certain groups, but that didn't necessarily mean that it would always show to the right people. And we also did DMA targeting, right? So you could target the whole San Francisco Bay Area, for example. Now it's at the zip code level, and it's pretty well defined right there. Oh, the other one I should talk about is, going back, is location versus intent targeting. Now, here's an example that puts this into perspective. If you're advertising hotels, you could advertise to hotels, and you could geo-target New York. In the past, what that meant to Google is either somebody types in New York hotels, right? So they've indicated they're looking for something in New York, even if they're not physically located in New York. So even if that person is located in San Francisco, but they did a search for New York hotels, we're going to show them the ads that are targeted to New York. Okay, that's one way. What Google has now done is we've said we're going to break this out. So you can tell us, are you doing location targeting based on where that user is located or the intent of the user. Right? You can include or exclude both of those. So now you could say I have one hotel campaign for people looking for New York hotels who are physically located in New York, and a different one for people looking for New York hotels but who are not physically located in New York. And that's cool because someone who's already in New York may just look for a hotel for one night because they're local. Maybe they're just doing business in the city that day. Whereas somebody coming from San Francisco or somebody coming from Paris, they might stay for the whole week, so that's probably a higher value sale. So you want to bid higher on those keywords, right? So now you have this geo-targeting that's at a much more granular level that gives you the ability to be much more profitable using local targeting. Okay, and then the final prong of SOLO-MO, social, local, and mobile, is of course mobile. Mobile is huge these days as well. There's no question about this. In 2010, we saw that 10% of queries on Google were on mobile devices. Anecdotally, I've heard from a couple of clients that they're seeing 20 to 30% of searches coming from mobile already in this year. And so, people have been talking, this is the year of mobile for a very long time, and that year has certainly come. It's already a couple of years behind us probably, and this is only growing very, very fast from this point forward. So if you don't have a mobile strategy, it's absolutely something to be thinking about, because at this point, more than half of US consumers have smartphones. And if you have a smartphone, you bet they'll be doing a lot of searches. They can do voice searches. These phones are really easy to use, so they'll actually do transactions on these phones. Part of mobile, by the way, is iPads and tablets, but that only accounts for about a third to a fourth of the traffic that we're seeing. Right? So there's still a huge opportunity for actual mobile devices. And what you can do more recently on Google is do mobile device targeting. So you can have one campaign for tablet devices, one campaign for mobile phones, high-end mobile phones, different types of mobile phones. You can even have different carriers that you're targeting. So I talked to one customer, and he was a locksmith. And he said, oh yeah, I'm going to run a mobile campaign that's targeting just iPhones in this specific zip code, because I know someone who has an iPhone probably has a little bit of money. And if they're in that specific zip code, that's the dangerous part of town. So they want to get out of there as quickly as possible if they should be locked out of their car. Right? And that's just the kind of stuff that you can now imagine doing because you have that granularity of targeting that you maybe didn't have in the past. Now, this is, of course, also backed up by consumer behavior, right? How many of us, first thing we do in the morning when we wake up is pull out our phone, check our email. Last thing we do before we go to sleep is we set the alarm on the app, right? These mobile devices are just with us all the time, and that's why this is becoming so important. Here's another experience that involves mobile. So that's yet another product that really demonstrates the whole social, local, and mobile all coming together. And in this case, it's the Google Mobile Wallet, which I use all the time at Whole Foods nowadays. And Home Depot and a number of other retailers have it. It's very cool stuff that Google's building as well. So how many of you guys in the room have apps for Android? OK, so a handful of you. So now we have extensions on ads. So you can actually have an app extension. So that's something that's fairly new from Google. It's new within the last month. Definitely something to try out if you're trying to get more users for the apps that you've been building already. And then finally, the last ads product that I wanted to talk about is the Google Display Network. Now, anyone remember when this was introduced? Of course, George knows. 2003. So it's pretty old at this point. It was introduced fairly quickly after Google AdWords self-service was launched. It was a company that we bought, and so we started doing contextual targeting. Now, in the beginning, it wasn't very good because we'd done a few things. We opted in everybody by default, and there was not a lot of control, so you couldn't specifically target what sites. You didn't even have bids specifically for the content network. So people were losing a lot of money on this, and a lot of people started turning it off. And here we are, 9 years later. It's improved quite a bit. And if you still have it turned off, I do want to show you a few reasons why I think it's actually pretty compelling to consider turning it back on. Now, I'm kind of a search evangelist, so I believe search advertising is the first place you have to start. But there are certainly other ways that you can increase your volume and still get really good results and display somewhere along that spectrum, right? Start with search, but display. Specifically, remarketing is probably the next one, and then contextual targeting is the third one. But some of the results that we've seen is when people run display campaigns at the same time as search campaigns, there's a 22% lift in conversions if you run them together. So 22% lift that you wouldn't have gotten from running just one of them. The other thing that we see is when it comes to remarketing, 28% lower cost per acquisitions, more than 50% increase in conversions compared to just running on the display network in general. Right? So remarketing is super, super powerful. Now, there's been dramatic changes in the ways that people shop. And this is sort of what's backing this up. The reason we're even talking about the display network is that people spend 5% of time on the internet doing searches. They spend a whole lot of time doing other stuff on the internet, but also still on newspapers, on television, all these other places. So when a consumer is shopping these days, the average consumer has 10 touch points with different media before they actually convert. And the display network is certainly a part of that. Now, in 2012, this is the beta slide, the beta feature slide. So I'm sure the RKG folks are loving this because they always ask us, what are the next betas? What are you going to be doing next? Well, this is sort of the 2012 roadmap. So improving contextual targeting, adding demographics, making remarketing smarter and easier, and then also doing dynamic remarketing. Right, so I'll talk about a few of these. Basically, the contextual targeting engine, that was built in 2003. We had it in 2003. We've recently done a big overhaul. Now, if you guys run display campaigns, you know that you have to theme your ad groups, and it's not keyword-based, right? So it's not a single keyword that triggers your ad to show, but it's the theme of the ad group. Okay, well, what's the theme of the ad group? How do you figure out the theme of the ad group? Well, you're kind of guessing, to be honest. And if you remove one of the keywords, does that make it better? Does that make it worse? Would it be better to add another keyword? You just don't know. It's very hard to understand. Whereas on search, well, you put in a keyword, and you know what that keyword's going to drive. And we're not going to talk about exact match and how that's no longer exact match, right? You sort of still know what it's going to drive. But on the display network, it was even more of a black box than that was before. And so what they've done is they've said, well, now it's actually going to be much more like search. So every keyword you can bid on separately. Every keyword is going to be triggering certain ads. So if you find that a certain keyword on the display network is not driving good results, because now you get results at the keyword level in the display network, you can change the bid. You can do dynamic keyword insertion off of these keywords. You can have keyword level URLs for these keywords, right? None of this sounds very exciting because you already have this on search. But now all of that good stuff that makes search so successful is available on the display network as well. And then the next one, remarketing. Remarketing, really big, right? It works really well, but it's been hard to use. And so one of the things we're doing is we're adding a new universal tag that you can add to your websites, but the one that I prefer is the Google Analytics tag. So most of you guys probably have Google Analytics running on your websites. You already get the data. Well, you make one little change to that tag, all of that data now comes into Google Analytics. And what you can start doing is instead of traditional remarketing where you say, okay, well, who are the cookies of the people that came to my shopping page? Let me do retargeting, remarketing to them. Okay, well, that's good, but is that as good as it could be? No. If you go into Google Analytics, you could say, well, who are my frequent visitors, right? So in Google Analytics, you literally make a cookie list that says, these are the people that visited me more than 10 times. That becomes a remarketing list, right? These are your frequent shoppers. These are your loyal customers. You can target specifically to them. You could look at the size of the basket. So anyone whose basket size has been bigger than $200 becomes its own group. By the way, you can merge these two groups. So now you could say big baskets, frequent visitors. Right? What we're doing is we're making it really easy. So as opposed to you having to put on different cookies on different pages and then figuring out on the back end how to merge these cookie lists and all that hard stuff, you just go into Google Analytics. We'll give you an easy-to-use interface, something you're already pretty used to with Google Analytics, and then you build the cookie lists from that. And then you can look at other factors like the traffic source. Maybe you could even look at the date of their travel. So if they just booked a hotel and you know that they're traveling in July, maybe June's a good month to remind them that they haven't bought a rental car yet. Right? So now you can do all of these things that were very hard in the past, make it much more easy because of the Google Analytics remarketing tag. And then take it one step further, you can also tie this into your Google Merchant Center account. So now you can do dynamic ads based on what the user had been looking at in the past. Right? So if you knew what was in their shopping cart, you can actually remarket those specific products very, very easily to them. And so we've seen some advertisers with a 450% increase in click-through rate just by making the ads automatically more relevant. And then finally, I wanted to show you one more thing where we're really trying to delight users and make them super happy with the products that we have. And this is a final example that came out of Google X and another one of Sergey's projects. So that's yet another super inspiring story of how Google delights its users, makes the world a better place, and hopefully gives people more time to click on ads because they no longer have to drive. And that will be clicks for you guys. So with that, thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to take some questions if you have any. All right, question in the back. When can you opt into the Cars beta program? So we've just launched this in Nevada. The first license plates have just been granted for those cars. And I believe they right now they're red license plates so that they stand out to the police. And the number on it is infinity because that's sort of a vision of the future. And then as soon as the cars are legally able to drive themselves without an operator in the car, right, as you noticed in that video, there was a Google operator in the passenger seat who could take control of the car, who could stop it, who could override it. So as soon as that's no longer required, then the state of Nevada will issue green license plates, and those will then be self-driving cars that have passed those tests. And hopefully very, very soon. I'm waiting for it too. Yeah. OK, well, thank you very much, guys, and enjoy lunch and the rest of the afternoon. Thanks.
Thanks, Fred. That was great.